Guten Abend, herzlich willkommen Ben und Gail und Ralf. Ich freue mich so, dass es heute klappt, aus Deutschland jemand zu hören. Ich stelle mich ein bisschen vor. Mein Name ist Nikolaus Saller, 81 Jahre. Ich wohne in Fürstenstein, Landkreis Passau, also in Bayern. In meiner Gemeinde Fürstenstein gab es 1945 den Bahnhof Nammering. Und diesen Bahnhof hat Ben Lesser für 5 Tage besucht. Ja, aber ganz unfreiwillig. Er war nämlich eingepfercht in einem Todeszug. Was in Nammering geschah, habe ich hier aufgeschrieben. Ich zeige das Bild. KZ-Zug 1945. 54 Waggons mit 5009 Häftlingen. In 5 Tagen wurden 794 Menschen hier ermordet. Er hat hier überlebt, weil Ben war in einem geschlossenen Waggon, der nie geöffnet worden ist.
Nicholas, if you want to hold it up a little bit so we can see it. Up, higher, higher, higher. Picture. Oh, well, there you go. Good back.
Okay.
Here you go.
Jedes Jahr
Ja.
ist eine Gedenkfeier bei uns in Nammering. Für die fast 800 Ermordeten betet Ben Lesser immer das Totengebet und er schickt uns eine Videobotschaft als Hauptredner. Hier ist Ben Lesser. Er spricht zu uns. Es sind an die 300 Leute da. In Dachau schaffte es Ben, lebend aus seinem Waggon mit den vielen Leichen herauszukriechen. Heute ist er der einzige Überlebende davon. Und wir sind so glücklich darüber, dass er noch da ist. Lieber Ben, wir freuen uns so und wir danken dir von Herzen, dass du uns erzählen willst. Vor 5 Jahren habe ich Ben im Internet gefunden. Wir sind seitdem Freunde geworden und ich habe sein Buch ins Deutsche übersetzt. Für 20 € von mir zu bekommen, ein E-Mail an mich genügt. Dann habe ich jetzt sein Buch auf 32 Seiten verkürzt. Und er hat keine Ruhe mehr gegeben und sagte, Nikolaus, dieses Heft muss jeder Schüler in Deutschland bekommen. Und seitdem habe ich auch keine Ruhe mehr gehabt und habe alle Schulen in Deutschland angeschrieben. Und da sitzen wir heute alle und bitten dich, lieber Ben, erzähl uns von dir. Und vor allem, sag uns, was du uns sagen willst.
All right. Thank you for that. We appreciate you so much, Nicholas. And I'm going to hand it off to Ben's daughter, Gail. And Gail, if you want to say a few words and then introduce Ben and start sharing your screen.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is quite an honor and a pleasure for Ben and I to be able to do this event for you. There are very few survivors that have been through the camps, been on death marches and in death trains. Ben is one of the few survivors today that is still speaking of this. And you will also learn later on the death train that Ben is the last living survivor of the most notorious death train from Buchenwald to Dachau right before liberation. It is my honor and my pleasure to introduce my father, Ben Lesser.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Gail. First of all, I want to thank Ralph Krauss for arranging this speaking engagement, and Nicholas Saller, who I love very much, who is involved in getting all of this together. I'm so grateful to both of you, Ralph and Nicholas, and of course, my daughter Gail is very, very active in Zachor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation. Let me just say to you that I am so honored to be speaking to you wonderful German students. I wanted to speak to you so many times, but it was very hard. Ralph Krauss did all the arranging, and Nicholas Seller. Those two worked day and night to arrange this. I'm so grateful to them, and I'm grateful that I can talk to you in person. I want you to know, dear students, that I care for you. And I am honored to speak to you again. Please try and remember what I tell you, because there's so few of us survivors left who went through the camps. I only have hope that I have enough time to continue and finish the story. So let me begin. I was born in Krakow, Poland in 1928 to a wonderful family of 7. We lived in Krakow, Poland. Do you have a picture of my family? Anyway, I don't see a picture. There it is. My father, Lazar, my mother, Shari, my oldest brother, Morris, and Lola, my oldest sister. My oldest sister was Goldie, and I am in the middle of that picture. My little brother, Tuli. Out of the 7 of us, only 2 of us survived. My sister Lola and I. The rest of them were all slaughtered by the Nazis. You know, we now know that the whole world knew what was happening to the Jewish people, but they chose to be silent, giving Hitler carte blanche to do with them anything that he wished. And he did. 6 million of us, 1.5 million of whom were children, and the world was silent. Not a peep. When I think 6 million. What a number. I can't even imagine. 6 million people slaughtered by the Nazis. In 1937, 1937, November of 1937, the war broke out. I was about 10 and a half years old. And one early in the morning, the whole building, we lived in a 3-story building. The whole building started to shake and rattle. We went to the window and I saw tanks were rolling down the street. Following the tanks, there were half tracks. And every few steps, a soldier would jump out of the half track, get on the sidewalk, and this is how they occupied the city. And following them were the Wehrmacht with their shiny black boots and their goose steps. It was quite impressionable for a 10-and-a-half-year-old. And as soon as they passed the street, my father called us into the dining room, set us down on chairs, and he said to us, "Okay, from this moment on, there are no more kids. You're all adults. You will obey, you're gonna listen, no backtalk." And this is how we grew up overnight. 5 days later, we found out what Nazi brutality was all about. A truck pulls up to the gate at 5 a.m. and it's full of soldiers, and they started to bang on the gate. The super came running out. What's happening? All they wanted to know is where the Jewish people lived. He was quick to oblige. He showed them our apartment. He also showed them our neighbor's apartment. There was a young Jewish couple who had 2 daughters, a little younger than I. And the mother gave birth to an infant little boy 2 months earlier. They came breaking down the door, coming in. We were still in bed, 5 a.m., and they were pistol whipping us. In their hands, they had sacks, and they were yelling, "Throw in all your valuables, money, gold, silver, anything of value." They threw into the sacks. And they were beating up my father to open up the safe. While my father is trying to open the safe, we hear this terrible screaming from our neighbor's apartment. My sister Lola and I ran out through our kitchen door to their kitchen door, and this is what we saw. This monster was holding the infant little boy by its legs and swinging it, yelling to the parents, "Make him shut up." The parents and the daughters are screaming, our baby, don't hurt our baby." With a smirk on his face, you can see he was enjoying what he was doing, and he smashes the baby's head into a doorpost, killing it instantly. It's the memories that won't leave me day and night. That screaming baby and that sudden silence and what came out of his head. We all jumped on this monster, and the other soldiers heard something was going on. They came running in and they pulled us off him. They pistol whipped us and pulled us off. And they were a little shocked themselves. They said, okay, Hans, let's go. They gathered together all of their booty, all the money and gold they got together, and they threw it in a sack. They threw the sack into a truck, and they took off. This was the 5th day after occupation. From that day on, things started to happen, one ordinance after another, day after day. Every Jewish person had to wear a Star of David, an armband. Even children from the age of 4 up. And a new ordinance came in. The Jewish people could not travel or it was a curfew from 7 to 7, from 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening. We all had to be in the house. It was a curfew. And the strange thing was that if the Jewish people disobeyed any of these ordinances, there were no judges, no juries, not even prisons. They simply shot you. And every morning there were people dead on the street. One day a new ordinance came in that the Jewish people may no longer reside in Krakow. But those of us who wanted to live in Krakow, stay in Krakow, had to go into a ghetto. But they gave us a choice. If you did not want to go into the ghetto, you can go to a small community outside of the city, but you can't live in Krakow, in the city. My father was preparing to go into the ghetto. His whole family, numbering over 200, all went into the ghetto. When a young man walked up to my father, he says, Mr. Lesser, by the name, his name was Michael Lieber. He says, Mr. Lesser, you know how I feel about Lola, your daughter Lola. I'm in love with her, and someday I'd love to marry her. But do me a favor, come to the same community that my parents and I are moving to. Well, my father gave him a choice to go into the ghetto or to Niepolomice. The name of the community was Niepolomice. He chose Niepolomice. And that was miracle one, because all the people who went into the ghetto a few months later were taken in cattle cars and sent to Belzec, an extermination camp, and everyone was killed. All the people in the ghetto were killed. So lucky for us, we went to Niepolomice. On the way to Niepolomice, we're being stopped, halt, and 2 husky Nazis jump on the wagon, and they wanted to know if we have any literature, books, and they saw 2 sacks full of books. In one of the books, my father put in $1,000 American that he saved up for a rainy day. I didn't tell you, my father's business was a wine and syrup manufacturing. And he also had a chocolate factory, Pishinger Chocolate Factory. He was the first one in Poland to manufacture chocolate-covered wafers, something like Kit Kat. And every time my father would come home from work, us kids would search his pockets. He always made sure to have some goodies in there for us. Of course, everything was confiscated. And my father had 1,000 American dollars that he saved up for a rainy day. He put it in one of those books and put it in a sack. And now these Nazis saw this sack full of books. They picked them up and they heaved it on the side of the road. They were going to have a bonfire. They had a mountain full of books there. My sister Lola spoke a beautiful German. She walks up to him and she says, "Look, my father is a writer. He wrote his autobiography. Let him keep this one book." He looked at her. Maybe he liked the way she spoke German. He says, "Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes if you can find it." The whole family jumped on the mountain of books. All these books looked alike. They were leather-bound, brown or black. And we keep sliding down. After 5 minutes, he chased us away, and we did not find that book. Now my father comes with a family of 6 to they were going to have a bonfire after everybody went through that road, burn all the books. My father arrived in this new community, Nepalamice, where Michael Lieber rented half of this house for us, and the other half lived the apple orchard farmer. In the middle between our room and the apple orchard farmer's room, there was a baking oven in the middle of the hallway. People used to bake their own bread in those days. When Michael Lieber heard what happened to my father, that everything was taken away, he brought him a sack full of flour, 100 pounds of flour, figuring he'll be able to bake some bread to feed the family. When my father saw the flour, his face lit up. Instead of baking bread, he started to bake pretzels. Why pretzels? All you need for pretzels is flour, water, and salt. And those ingredients he had. Then he took those pretzels to the neighboring bars and offered it for sale. It was a novelty, and they started to buy the pretzels. Now my father became a little baker in that community. He baked cakes and bread and matzahs and holly and mandel bread and the whole family helped him bake. I don't know how he knew that. He wasn't in the bakery business, but how he knew it, I don't know. I was 12 years old, and I remember baking with my father. To this day, I still bake some of the things that I remember. We had no recipes. Everything was done just by feel. This went on for a whole year. Michael and Lola get married. As soon as they got married, we had a lot of people who came in the backyard was the wedding. All these people were wedding guests. And out of all these people, only 3 of us survived the war. Lola, Michael, and I. The rest of them were all slaughtered by the Nazis. My little brother in a white suit, Thule, is resting against my mother. Everybody was killed. Lola and Michael move into a duplex. One side of a duplex lived the owner, and one side Michael and Lola. The owner happened to be the mayor of Nepalomice, the mayor of that community. One evening, the mayor comes home and he says, Michael and Lola, save yourselves. I heard the rumor there is going to be a raid against the Jewish people tonight or tomorrow night. When Michael heard it, he went out and he hired a wagon with the driver, and we all snuck out in the middle of the night. The only place we can go was the nearest city that was called Bochnia. Bochnia had a ghetto that meant we had to go inside the ghetto. Bochnia ghetto had a very bad reputation. Every so often, 2 or 3 dump trucks would come into the ghetto. The Nazis would go from house to house, pull out the children from their beds and throw them into these dump trucks. The parents were screaming for their children, the children were screaming for the parents. And as they filled up 2 or 3 dump trucks, they would start to pull out of the ghetto. The parents were running behind these trucks and screaming and yelling for their children. But these cultured people had machine guns at the end of each truck, and they would mow down the parents running behind them in front of their children. No one ever heard of these kids again. We can just imagine what they did to them. That resonated throughout Europe. Stay away from Bochnia Ghetto because of these atrocities. But we had no choice. And a good thing we did leave, because that later that night in Nepalomice, there was a raid. And they went from house to house. They pulled out all the Jewish people, put them in trucks, took them to the forest. The men were given shovels to dig a ditch, and everyone was shot. How do we know this? My sister Lola and I survived the war. We went back to Nepalomice to find out what happened to all the people. And the farmers were telling us, as they went to the forest to pick mushrooms and berries to sell in the market in the morning, they saw these trucks pull in, and they were hiding behind trees, and they saw everything. They said the ground was moving for 3 days afterwards. They were such killers. They didn't care if they killed you or buried you alive. So it's a good thing we went to Bochnia. If we would have If you would have been in Nepalomitsa, I wouldn't be here to tell you the story. In Bochnia Ghetto, he unloaded us in the middle of the street. And Michael sees a school buddy, a friend of his by the name of Farber, who happened to be a school buddy. Farber says, Michael, what are you doing here? Michael tells him the story about Nepalomitsa. And this Farber happened to be a Jewish policeman inside Bochnia Ghetto. They had no weapons. All they had is a baton on the side. And he says to Michael, he says, don't worry, I'll take you to a place, find a place for you to live. And he took Michael, Lola, and his parents someplace. And then he took my father, my mother, myself, my little brother, Tuli, to another room. There were 8 other people inside that room. Now we were 12. There were no beds. All they had is straw on the ground, blankets on top of the straw. Blankets were hanging from the ceiling, separating each family. Everybody inside the ghetto had to work. If you didn't work, you didn't receive any rations, you'll die. I was about 13 years old, and I worked in a uniform factory, sewing on buttons inside the ghetto, into uniform factory for soldiers. It was easy work, but it was 12 or 13 hours a day, very little sleep, and very little food. This went on for over a year. Then Farber goes over to Michael one day. He says, Michael, Lola, save yourselves. I heard the rumor there's going to be a raid inside the ghetto tonight. Ever since, those trucks would pull in the ghetto and they would pull out the children from their beds. Every house and every apartment had a hiding place. They called them bunkers. This is when I found out our bunker was this piece of furniture where you open the doors, you push the clothing apart, the back panel would slide apart, and there was a hole in the wall, and the 12 of us could crawl it through the hole and stand between 2 walls. The last person would close the door behind them, put the clothing back, close the back panel, and the 12 of us would stand there all night long, and we heard shootings, dogs barking, screaming. We heard the dogs tearing apart our neighbors all night long. Towards morning, we decided to come out and got quiet. When we came out, we couldn't believe what we saw. We saw our neighbors torn apart into pieces, laying in the snow. We saw a mother and an infant little boy. The boy was dead. The mother was still breathing, torn apart. People going around in push carts, picking up these bodies and pieces of bodies. placing him in the push cart as high as they could, and taking him to the ghetto square and piling them up on the ghetto square. And these cultured people would come with gasoline cans, pour gasoline over the people, and they started a Bochnia ghetto human bonfire. Some people were still alive and screaming. Can you imagine what it was like? Ashes flying, screams, that smell. I knew that Michael and Lola were hiding in a doghouse. You heard right, a doghouse. Michael is telling me the story as he's about to go into the doghouse. Another Jewish policeman walks to him. He says, by the name of Morris Schiller, he says, Michael, I know about your hiding place inside the doghouse. He says, unless you take my mother and my sister along, I'll tell the authorities. Well, there was only rooms for 7 under the floor of this doghouse. There was a big hole. There was only room for 7. Now there were 9. So Michael and Lola walked away so the other 7 could go down into the doghouse. When Michael and Lola's walking the street, Michael sees Farber. He asks him, what are you doing on the street? Why aren't you hiding someplace? And Michael tells him the story about Morris Schiller. He says, don't worry, Michael and Lola, follow me. Where my sister and her 2 children are hiding, there is room for you. He took him to a leather factory, a tannery. Next to the tannery, there was a water tank. He says, my sister and her 2 children are inside that water tank. There's a step ladder in the back. You climb up, you rope. There's a rope, you can lower yourself. I will take away the step ladder. In the morning, when you hear a knock on the tank, that means the coast is clear, you can come out. Michael is telling the story. He's lowering himself into the tank, and he sees his sister is standing knee-deep in water. His little girl is waist-high in water, and the mother is holding an infant little boy sound asleep. And they're shaking and shivering. Michael picked up the little girl from the water. Lola took the little boy from the mother, and they all stood there in the water, shaking and shivering all night. They even had little water rats who were swimming and nibbling at their feet all night long. Towards morning, it got quiet, and they heard that knock on the tank. The coast is clear. Michael and Lola and everybody pulled themselves out of the tank. And after they got a little circulation back into their legs, they wanted to see what happened to Michael's family at the doghouse. They went to the doghouse, and this is what they saw. All 7 people laying in the snow with a bullet hole in their head, in the middle of their head. everybody dead. Lola started to scream, and Michael stopped her. He says, they may still be burning bodies. They're going to hear you. With a quiet, quelched, they knew what they had to do. Little Marika was still in the corner, holding the doll that Lola made her for her 7th birthday. According to the Jewish religion, you're supposed to bury your loved ones within between one day, 12 hours or 24 hours, if you can. So Michael went out and he found a wheelbarrow, took the family to the wheelbarrow into the cemetery, and he found the shovel. He dug out the grave to put the family into the grave. When Morris Schiller walks up to him, he says, it wasn't my fault. And it wasn't his fault because his own mother, his own sister were also killed. He says, there's graves that you put your family in, you're going to have to take them out because I want it for my mother, my sister. Lola started to cry. Michael told him, look, he's got the power over us. They took the whole family out, put him back on the wheelbarrow, took him to another spot, and started all over again. While this is going on, there's a Jeep coming up the hill, and they stop at the cemetery. 2 husky Nazis jump out of the out of the car. They came in the cemetery and they yell, Morris Schiller, Morris Schiller. And he walks up to them, jawohl, here I am, jawohl. He walks up to them. They pull out the revolver and they shot him. This is what they did to people who have seen too much. They didn't want to leave any witnesses. So afterwards, they went down the hill and Michael and Lola buried the family and they came down the hill holding each other, crying. They came down to their apartment and they hear people going around and yelling. Anyone left in the ghetto had to go to the Uniraut and register. If you didn't register, you will not receive any rations, you're going to die. My whole family went to the Uniraut to register. I don't know how much time I have. So all I can tell you is a miracle happened and we were able to get out of the ghetto and pull with us 55 people outside the ghetto with us. You'll have to read my books to find out what happened to. It was a miracle, and it was a very interesting story. Outside the ghetto, Michael befriends a truck driver who was hauling coal. He asked him if he would convert his truck into a double-decker, coal on top, and between the coal and the chassis, there'd be room for people to hide, and he'll be able to take them to the border of Czechoslovakia in Poland, and there'll be a smuggler waiting there. We will pay him a lot of money. And he listened to us. He agreed. He changed his truck into a double-decker. And now it was time for 10 people fit inside to go in. Michael and Lola went first, and another 8 people from another family. Why did Michael and Lola go first? Because you couldn't always trust these drivers. They will take your money up front, then they would turn you into the Gestapo or headquarters, and they get paid ransom money for Jewish people trying to escape. So Michael and Lola went first, and we had a password made up between us. If the driver comes back with the right password, then you can trust him. If he comes back with the wrong passport, don't trust him. 2 days later, the driver comes back with the right passport. Gail, how
Yes,
are you doing time-wise?
you're fine. You're fine. Continue.
Okay, so now when the driver came back, it was time for another 10 Jewish people to go in the truck, 8 from this one family and 2 from our family. My father and mother insisted that I and my little brother go next, and they would come in the next transport. So my brother and I went in just like a sardine, pushed into this truck, laying on our side. I'm looking at my little brother, Tully, face to face, and we're leaving. 2 hours outside of the city of Bochnia, we're being stopped. And a bunch of soldiers with rifles talked to the driver, and the truck started to move again. And then we see that on the step next to the driver, there's a soldier with a rifle. Now we heard soldiers walking on top of the coal. We figured somebody turned us in, they're going to kill us all. 2 hours, and my little brother, and you know, the coal dust started to filter through, and my little brother is about to sneeze, and I'm holding his nose and his mouth, and they were with us for 2 hours, and then they stop, and we are already saying our prayers, and all of a sudden we hear Dankeschön, Dankeschön. Imagine they were just hitchhiking. They had no idea there were 10 Jewish people under their feet. And the driver took us 2 hours more into the forest. It was nighttime. He told us to go out, walk about 300 yards into the forest. There's a tool shed, and inside the tool shed, the smuggler is waiting for you. We came to the tool shed, and we see a forest ranger who happened to be the smuggler waiting for us. He took us in the middle of the forest. He made us lay down on our stomach. He says, look up, and we see soldiers with rifles and dogs walking back and forth next to barbed wire. That was the border between Czechoslovakia and Poland. He says at 3 a.m., they walk down the hill and they meet fresh soldiers on the bottom of the hill, they have a little ceremony. During those 10 minutes, we can try and cross the border if we're quiet and nobody hears us, which is exactly what happened. At 3 a.m., they started to go down the hill. And when they went down, they came down on the ground, on the hill, down the hill. They met fresh soldiers, and they had a little ceremony, and we shimmied our way up on our stomach and our knees to the barbed wire. He picked up the barbed wire, told us to cross. Then he told us, be very careful because there is a big drop, a ravine. And if you're not careful, if you tumble, it's all over. They're going to hear you. Sit down at the edge of the mountain, hold hands, and slide down quietly, which is exactly what we did. And we slid down. It was pitch black. You couldn't even see your hand in front of you. We came down at the bottom of the hill. There was a plateau, and we stopped. I asked my little brother, are you okay? He says, yes. When somebody taps me on my shoulder, I jump out of my skin. Who in the world, in the middle of nowhere, says, Bainish? Only my immediate family called me Bainish. He says, I'm your uncle Bela, your mother's brother. I came here to help you cross the border from Czechoslovakia to Hungary. How did you know in the middle of the night where to find me? He says, when Michael and Lola went across, they contacted us and they told us exactly where you will come down the hill. So I waited here for you. Well, to tell you the story how we had to cross the border between Czechoslovakia and Hungary is a long story. I'm going to skip it. Just asking you again, please read it in my book. You will be surprised what happened. And we are now in Budapest, Hungary. We meet Michael and Lola. We go to a restaurant, we have a dinner. And that night, my uncle took us to the railroad station. We boarded the train and we went all night long. We went to Munkács. Munkács, Hungary is where my oldest sister is waiting for me, and my grandparents from my mother's side, my uncles, my aunts, they're all waiting. Next morning, we arrived and we meet the whole family. We have a nice reunion, and my uncle invites me, my little brother, to stay in his house. He was a very rich man. He had a yardage goods store, and he was selling yardage goods for dresses and suits. Above the store, he had his house. He invited us to stay in his house. So we came in his house and he told him, Uncle, you know, if the Nazis ever come into Hungary, they're going to take away everything that you have. It would make sense to convert your assets into diamonds and hide it on our body, on our clothes. And he listened to me. And one day he came home with boxes full of shoes. And he told us, know that in the heels of these shoes, there are diamonds. Use it only in a life-threatening situation. He gave every member of the family a pair of these shoes. 1 month, 2 months. And we were waiting for our family, my father and mother, to come across. Nothing happened. 3 months. Somebody came across who knew my parents, and he told us the story, what happened to them. He says, as they were about to go into the truck, a farmer from one of the neighboring houses saw that. He called the SS and Gestapo. They came, they pulled everybody out. All 10 people plus the driver, all 11, were lined up against the wall, and everybody was shot. So I learned what happened to my parents. 2 months, three months later, in March of 1944, the Nazis come into Hungary like they were invited guests. They came in, they knew every Jewish person, their name, their address, their education, their business, everything. How come? They didn't have computers in those days. IBM had punch cards, and they would sell these punch cards to anyone who would pay the price. IBM doesn't deny it, but they said they didn't know for what purpose they're going to use it. And this is what the Nazis told us. Germany needs workers. You will all be relocated to Germany. Able-bodied men and women will be working. Children will be schooled. Older people will be cared for. Bring along all your valuables that you can carry, but leave everything else behind. Anyone found hiding will be shot. And they marched us to the railroad station. They had cattle cars waiting for us. And while I'm waiting to get into the cattle car, I see 2 men with a stretcher walking up. They put down the stretcher right by my feet. And I see this woman on the stretcher bloodied. I take a good look. It's my sister, Goldie. I says, Goldie, what happened to you? She says she tried to escape. She went as far as the railroad station. And she saw a Hungarian gendarme who recognized her from school. He called the SS and turned her in. They beat her to a pulp. And now they order us to go into these cattle cars. 82 cattle car wouldn't be so bad if it were not for the bundles and valises. Now it was so tight, if somebody wanted to stand up, someone else had to. If someone wanted to sit down, someone else had to stand up. 82 cattle car, they had 2 buckets of water. Once the water was gone, there are no sanitary facilities, no toilets for 80 people. 1 day, 2 days. Can you imagine what happened? We started to use those buckets. And now those buckets would overflow, fill over. And now we couldn't sit on the floor anymore because of the waste, human waste. It was terrible. Night 3, we arrived at a place called Oświęcim. Oświęcim was Polish for Auschwitz. And they go into a yard with a gate on top of it. The gate said, Arbeit macht frei. Labor gives you freedom. And we stood there for 2 hours. Then the train started to move again. It went for 3 more kilometers down the road. And it stopped at a place called Birkenau. Birkenau was part of Auschwitz. Birkenau was where all of the killing was done. Most of the killing was done in Birkenau. The train arrived, they opened up the doors and they're screaming in all different languages. Don't you pick anything up, leave all your belongings on the floor. Women and children to the right, men to the left. I'm holding on to my sister Goldie, my little brother Tully. They're just pulled away from me. I was 15 and a half. I could have gone with my sister and my little brother as a child, but I decided to go with my uncle, my cousin, as a man, figuring if this is a labor camp, they need you to labor. If you labor, they're going to feed us better. That was my only reason. And that saved my life. Had I gone with my sister, my little brother, I wouldn't be here to tell you the story. They went directly to the gas chamber. Who knew? We don't know about gas chambers, about killing. But this was a strange place. It was nighttime, and it was NBC 5 chimneys with flames shooting out of them, ashes flying like snow all over, a funny smell. And every time you make a step in the ashes, just like a snow, you leave a footprint. And we are in a line walking forward. The head of the line, there was a doctor called Dr. Mengele. Dr. Mengele was the angel of death. He decided who should live with a flick of the finger, just like that. When I came close to him, I don't know who he is. I see a doctor. But I hear him ask a young man a question. Kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? Can you run 5 kilometers? Or would you rather go by truck? He said he would rather go by truck. He had a bad knee. Poor soul, not realizing that meant certain death. He sent him to the right. But who knew? I don't know. Nobody knows. Right, left. But something didn't make sense to my 15-and-a-half-year-old mind. Why would he ask us to laufen 5 kilometers? I see the barracks are right here. I figured he's testing us to see if we're strong enough to work. I tell my uncle, my cousin, whatever he asks you, tell him, yes, you can run. You're strong to work. You're healthy. But let me go first because I spoke German. I walk up first. Remember, I was 15 and a half. Before he even asked me a question, I saluted him, stretched myself out, and I said, 18 Jahre alt, gesund und arbeitsfähig. I'm 18 years old, I'm healthy, and I can work. He asked me, kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? I said, jawohl. He sent me to the left. My uncle, my cousin also went to the left. They took us all, people on the left, to a big auditorium, like a school auditorium. And they had Nazi guards walking back and forth, and they yelled at us, get undressed, get out of your shoes, walk up to the line of barbers. They're going to cut your hair all over, and then you go into the showers. My uncle and my cousin who gave me those shoes with the diamonds, they went out of their shoes. I decided not to go out with my shoes. I had diamonds in my shoes. So talk about miracles. The Nazis were looking at me. Here I am naked, walking up to the line of barbers. They cut all my hair, and they say nothing about my shoes. The Nazis are looking at me. It's like God blinded their eyes. They don't say anything about my shoes. And I go into the barrack, into the showers with my shoes on. And after we showered, they gave us striped clothes with wooden shoes, wooden soles with canvas on top. I put my beautiful black shoes with the diamonds in my pockets, and I got into these wooden shoes, and we marched out into the barracks. When we came to the barracks, the Stubenälteste comes out of the barrack speaking a broken German. I could tell he was a Polish inmate. He says, "Ha, you Hungarian Jews. You think you're here on vacation? Think again. You see those chimneys, those ashes flying all over, those shooting flames? Those are your mothers, your fathers, your brothers, and your sisters. And if you don't behave, this is where you're going to wind up, ashes." I couldn't believe my sister, my little brother, Ash. And he chased us in the barrack, and we got a bunk on top, a 3-layer barrack. We got a top bunk, and we laid down and we fell asleep. My uncle, my cousin, and I, we were so tired, we fell asleep. An hour later, my cousin wakes me up. "Ben, get up." I says, what's happened? He says, "Listen." And I hear a chanting, a crying, or a singing. I can't make it out. And then he says, "Look, one board in the wall was missing, and we can see a flame shooting up. What is it?" I said, "I don't know, but I will find out." I go down, and I went to the Stubenälteste because I could tell he was a Polish inmate. And I asked the Stubenälteste, "What is happening here?" I asked him in Polish. He was so happy to hear somebody speak his own language. He couldn't stop telling me what's happening in Auschwitz. He was telling me those cryings that we hear are children being thrown into fiery pits. Alive. And he started to tell me all kinds of things about Auschwitz. He says 3 months before Hungary was occupied, in Auschwitz, they knew about it. They're going to occupy Hungary because they make him dig ditches. They made him dig ditches for fiery pits for the influx of the Hungarian Jews. You know what? I didn't believe him. It was nighttime, so I snuck out the side of the barrack and the barrack in front of me, and I saw a truck full of people, children. They're throwing them in to the fiery pits like they were garbage. I couldn't believe what I see. To this day, I cannot get over it. I get sleepless nights. I see them throw in those kids, and the kids are screaming as they throw them into the fiery pits. And he told us how long it takes to kill a person in the gas chambers. He says a half an hour, but they didn't have a half hour to give them because the trains were coming in fast and furious, full of people. So after 15 minutes, when they saw everybody was laying on the ground, they would have the Sonderkommando come in, open the doors, air it out for 15 minutes, and then go in and pull out these bodies, pull out their gold teeth, cut their hair, check their body all over, and then put them on gurneys, 5 on a gurney with a rope around them, push him on the gurney to the crematorium. But this was too slow of a process. Now they were taking these half-dead bodies and throwing them into a truck. And on top of the truck, they would throw in some of the children that they did not allow to go into the gas chambers alive. They would take the truck full of people and children to the fiery pits and throw them into these fiery pits alive. To this day, I see that vision and I can never forget it, day and night, what they were doing in Auschwitz and what we went through for 2.5 weeks in Auschwitz. I don't have enough time to tell you. Every morning we had to stand in Appell, naked, and they would come by and look at us and count us. And if you were too skinny, they would take you to the gas chambers. And everybody knew, said they're going to take you to the gas chambers. This went on every morning for 2.5 weeks. And after 2.5 weeks, they put us in trucks and they took us to a labor camp called Dernau. Dernau was a rock quarry As they dynamited the mountain and the boulders would come down, it was a hard job with sledgehammers, break these boulders into manageable pieces and throw them into mining cars, run it down the hill on the tracks to a grinding machine. They made gravel out of it, then push those cars back uphill. It was back-breaking work. And I figured my uncle is never going to survive this. So I bribed the kitchen chef with my diamonds to give my uncle a job in the kitchen. He took my diamonds and he gave my uncle a job in the kitchen. It got a little easier on us because my uncle could eat in the kitchen and then he would share his ration with us, with his son and me. Every evening when we came back from work, we would have to line up, and the kitchen help would also have to come out, line up with us, and everybody was counted. And after the count, they would dismiss us. We would go for our rations and then go into our barracks. This is what happened every day. One evening, we come home from work. They count us, and they count. And the commandant comes down with his Fräulein. She says, I'm going to teach these Schweinhund a lesson they'll never forget. What happened? 3 inmates escaped. And because of this, he orders his henchmen to pull out every 10th person in line to receive 25 lashes. As they were counting and pulling out every 10th person in line, I can see my uncle who is in front of me is going to be at 10. So I push him behind him and I took his place. They took all of us number 10 in the middle of the yard. They brought down hardwood stakes, one by one, about 2.5 feet long. And they brought down a sawhorse. And this is what they ordered us to do. Tiptoe in front of the sawhorse, bend over the sawhorse, but your stomach cannot touch the sawhorse. Because if you touch the sawhorse, you start all over again to count from 1. If you miscounted, you started from 1. If your heel touches the ground, you start from 1. The first man went up. Don't show this picture now. The first man went up. He miscounted. He touched the floor. He touched the 2x4. He fell. Minute he fell, the commandant goes over, kicks him in the face. Get up. He couldn't. He pulls out a revolver, shoots him right in the temple. His Fräulein walks over to him, gives him a hug and a kiss, like he just performed the heroic act. He killed a man. Number 2 went up. He too miscounted. He touched floor. He touched 2x4. Again and again, he falls. Minute he falls, the commandant goes over, kicks him in the face. Get up. He couldn't. Pulls out a revolver, shoots him. Number 3 goes up. He was a little younger. And he too miscounted. He touched the floor. He touched the 2x4. He yells out, please have mercy on me. Don't kill me. And the commandant says to him, then stand up come over here and face me. The poor guy stands up, walks 5 steps, his knees gave out, and he falls. The minute he falls, the commandant goes over, kicks him in the face, get up. He couldn't. Pulls out the revolver, shoots it. I have 3 dead bodies, and Ben Lesser is going up next. All I can tell you is psyched myself out. I said to myself, Ben, this is it. If you want to live another hour, you better do it exactly the way he tells you. No buts or ifs, exactly. I walk up to the sawhorse, tiptoe, bend over without touching it. One man is holding my trousers. The other man starts to hit, and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Finally, 20, 21, 22, 23, 25. I made it. You can hear a pin drop in that camp. No one believed that anyone could survive this. I didn't believe it myself. The man who was holding my trousers tells me to walk over and thank the commandant. I stand up. Blood is running down my legs. I walk over and I say, Dankeschön, Herr Kommandant. He puts his arm on my shirt collar, twists me around, facing those number 10s who are still to be beaten. He says, now I told you could be done. If you do it like this, Junge, you have nothing to worry about. While this is going on, there's a commotion at the gate. They caught those 3 inmates who escaped, and they were bringing them in, bloodied. You couldn't recognize any of them. When the commandant saw that, just like a child gets sick of a toy and throws it away, he tells all of us number 10 to go back to our original line. And then he tells his henchmen to bring down a portable gallows. And he made everybody watch how they were hanging each one individually. The 3rd one was a little younger, and they put the noose around his neck. And he yelled out Shema Yisrael, a Hebrew prayer before dying. The minute they heard it, they kicked the stool out from under him. They wouldn't let him complete the last 2 words. God is one. They were such sadists. What can I tell you? And then they dismissed us like nothing ever happened. We went for our rations, we went for barracks. For weeks, I could not lay on my back. I had to lay on my stomach because of my welts in my back. One night we hear cannon fire like the front was closing in. That morning we went to reported to work. There was a loudspeaker saying, no one is working today. The camp is being evacuated. Line up in rows of 5 and march out. I'm holding on to my cousin's hand, and my uncle was already in the kitchen. We couldn't say goodbye to him. We never saw him again. This was called the Death March. They called it the Death March because if you could not keep pace with the soldiers, they shot you. And all day long you heard pop, pop, pop. big shot. In my book, I say that I was in the death march 3 or 4 weeks. I didn't remember time, day or night. We were like zombies, walking like zombies day and night. The German, Mr. Salas, told us, called us up, and he called my daughter. He says that he read my book and he'd love to translate it to German. We gave him permission. However, he says, your dad made 2 mistakes in his book. What are the mistakes? I wrote that I only marched 3 or 4 weeks. He says, Mr. Lesser marched 7 weeks, 456 kilometers from Dürnhau to Buchenwald. And he knew. The other mistake I tell you in a little while. I don't know how we were able to do it for 7 weeks. The last week, my shoes fell apart and I was marching in snow. To this day, my feet are in trouble. 80 years later, my feet are still hurting from marching in the snow for a whole week. And we arrived to Buchenwald. In Buchenwald, they counted us. They told us to go into the barrack and they will feed you. You'll take a shower. In the morning, we'll give you fresh clothes. But Buchenwald is also being evacuated. So you have to show up early in the morning at 8 a.m. This picture is in the shower in Buchenwald. I don't know how they pictured, who took the picture, must have been a German. But that's a story in itself. In the morning, they gave us fresh clothes, and we had to be there 8 o'clock at the field, and they counted us, and they marched us out. Outside the gate of Buchenwald, we saw trains were lined up, kettle cars lined up, and they counted 80 to a kettle car to go in. I tell my cousin, I'll push you in. Be sure to find a space next to a wall so we can rest our back, because I remember going to Auschwitz and people all around me. It was terrible. And he found a spot. I pushed him and he found a spot. He held a spot for me. We went inside, 80 people. They closed the door. 2 hours later, they opened the door and they threw in 80 loaves of bread, a loaf of bread for each person. Picture this. Picture this. Those people who were next to the door were grabbing 3, 4, 5 breads. And us who were next to the wall, we had nothing. We don't know where we're going, for how long. I have to get a bread. So I started to climb over the inmates to go to the door to pretzel out the bread. While I was climbing on the inmate, somebody had a pocket knife and they stabbed me in my throat. I feel my mouth is filling up with blood. but I have to get a bread. I keep climbing to get a bread. And finally, this guy has a bunch of them. I pull one out, I put it in my pocket, and I go back to my cousin. He says, Ben, what's happening to you bleeding? I put my finger here and it went right through my tongue, a big hole. To this day, I have a mark. You can see my mark over my chin bone. It used to be in the middle of my throat when I was skinny. Anyway, don't ask me how we survived this. One bread, I rationed that bread between my cousin and myself. I gave each of us the size of a half an egg every midnight so no one could see us. If they could see that we had bread, they would kill us for it. Everybody around me was dying. 1 week, 2 weeks, no bread, no water. I still had the last piece of bread, 2 weeks. Lasted us. And the train was going for another week, shuttling back and forth. It was in Nemmering. It was in Nemmering for 5 days. And I was in a closed cattle car. I didn't even know that. And there, 794 people were slaughtered by the Nazis just because they needed 10 cattle cars empty. You probably know what happened in Nemmering. 3 weeks later, Eisenhower liberated that community, and he saw those bodies. He got so angry, he had everybody in town come and take these bodies, clean them up, put bathrobes on them, put them into separate gaskets and bury them separately. And they have this big yard where every year they have a ceremony. 794 people shot because they needed 10 cattle cars. Lucky for me, I was in another cattle car. Had I been there, I wouldn't be here to tell you. My cattle car might have been 11 or 12 or 13, I don't know. The train was shuttling back and forth for another week. And we finally arrived at a place called Dachau. In Dachau, they opened the door. By the way, the second mistakes that Mr. Salas told us is the mistakes that I said there were only 3,000 people on that train. There were over 7,000 people. And when we arrived into Dachau, only 18 of us walked out alive. They opened up the cattle car and they yelled, anyone who can walk out, walk into the camp of Dachau. Out of the cattle cars that I was in, 76 people were dead, and only 4 of us came out alive. My cousin, I, and 2 other men. And they tell us to go into to Dachau. We went through the gate and we see a mountain full of skeletons. Apparently, the Nazis ran out of coal to burn the bodies, so they piled them up as high as they could. and they put me and my cousin into a barrack right next to these bodies. 1 day, 2 days. The second night I hear, befreien, liberation, Americans, Americans. I tell my uncle, let's go see what's happening. My cousin, I'm sorry, my uncle. My uncle probably wasn't alive anymore. My cousin. And we walk up to the gate and we see our inmates are crawling on their hands and knees and killing the boots of the kissing the boots of the American GI. They liberated us. They looked like gods. 2 GIs walked up to me and my cousin, and one of them had a can of Spam. He opens it up. He hands it to me. We made a mistake. We ate some of it, and both of us came down with dysentery. My uncle dies in my arm the night of liberation, and I wouldn't let him go. I keep talking to him. They saw that, so they came, they took him away. I says, where are you taking him? And I followed. My knees gave out and I fell. When I fell, they pushed me against the wall. 2 hours later, a man walks up, nicely dressed, and he asked me in a broken German how many languages I speak. And when he hears Polish, he says, I'm a Polish Jesuit priest. I came here with nuns and doctors from Paris, and we're opening up a field hospital in the yard of Dachau. I'm going to take you to that hospital. He picks me up, puts me on his shoulder. I may have weighed 60 or 65 pounds. I was 16 and a half years old. He takes me to the infirmary. The nun has a cot. She puts a white sheet on it. I lay down on it. She takes my vitals and I pass out. 5 weeks later, I wake up in a monastery called St. Tertullian. In a monastery in St. Tertullian, Bavaria. The monks gave up one building to make it into a hospital for the survivors. What happened during the 5 weeks, I don't know. But when I opened my eyes, one of the nuns saw that. She started to scream, and all the other nuns were coming in. He's alive, he's alive. Lebt. And what I went through later, what happened to me later, and how I met my sister Lola, my only sister still alive from the family of 7, is a story in itself, and it would take me another 2.5 hours to tell. So please read my book. Gail, how we're doing. I believe that's it. And I thank you so much for listening to me. You students are the future of this world. I want you to know what happened to us, to those few survivors who survived the war. 6 million of our people were killed, 1.5 million of whom were children. I want you to know that and be good students, loving students, because Hitler and the Nazis did not start with killing. They started with hate. Hate, propaganda. This is how it began. The hatred has to stop. Why hate? Love and hate are both contagious. Choose love. There's no reason to hate. Be good students and loving children to your loving parents. Yes, you can tell future generation when you grow up what happened to the Jewish people in Germany during World War II.
Ben,
Yeah.
Ben, please speak into the camera. Please speak into the camera.
Yes, I will. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask.
Yeah, Ben, we have quite a few questions. We'll jump right in. We have a question from Victoria, and she is in France. Victoria, you can unmute to ask your question.
Hi. So I wanted to ask you, how do you find the courage to keep sharing your story even after all these years?
Victoria, it's not easy. Believe me, I forced myself because the story has to be told. There are so few of us left. Fewer survivors who actually went through the camps. You have to know what happened to keep this world from forgetting. The world has to know. It all started with hate. Hatred has to stop. It's not easy for me, but I force myself to tell the story. And I speak almost daily all over the world. I started a foundation called Zachor, Holocaust Remembrance Foundation. Zachor means remember. Because I don't want the world to forget. When you have a chance, please get on my website. You're going to find a lot of things. You're going to find a curriculum. You're going to find the shout out and many other survivor story. I have an A1, an AI.
AI.
AI, you can ask me any questions. You can take me home on your telephone now, and your phone, and ask me questions and I'll answer it. I was the only one who did that because I want the world to remember. Do not forget.
Very
It's not
poignant.
easy for me, but I force myself to do it.
Then we have a question from Selma, and Selma is in Spain, and then we're going to go to Arn in Germany, so you students can ask your questions. Selma, go ahead and unmute to ask.
Do you think that this could happen again?
I didn't hear that repeat.
She wanted to know, do you think something like the Holocaust could happen ever again?
It's a good question because nobody really knows the answer. What's going to happen years from now? This is why it's so important that you youngsters know what happened. You tell your children what happened. And all started with hate. Hatred has to stop. We're trying to keep this world a good world, a world that respects each human being in the world. It doesn't matter what nationality you are. We are all God's creation. We all have the same rights in this world. So yes, it's not easy for me, but I force myself to do it.
Thank you for sharing with us. We have Arn Graffi in Germany. Go ahead and unmute. You guys had a couple of questions. Go ahead and ask.
Okay.
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, yeah, sure. So the first question asked by the students was, what did you promise yourself after surviving? Did you make any specific plans or, yeah.
Can somebody repeat it, please?
What did you promise yourself after you survived? Once you survived the camps, did you make any promises to yourself as far as living a life that matters going forward?
What I call myself?
What did you promise yourself? Like how would you live your day-to-day life surviving the Holocaust to honor those your family members who passed away?
You know, as I retired, it's a very interesting story. I started to speak in schools and colleges and tell the kids. And the more I spoke, I realized they love it so much, you want to hear more and more. Someone had to do it. That's when I started the Zachor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation.
Ben,
Yeah.
I think the question is a little bit more just after the war. What did you say to yourself to continue to survive? Your parents were gone, your family was gone. What did you say to yourself? And I know that you said something to yourself when you saw the Statue of Liberty for the first time.
Yeah. Well, of course, I was very grateful. I feel that I was born in Saint Otilien 5 weeks after liberation. What I said to myself is, Ben, you survived the war. You have to make a good life for yourself and start all over again. In honor for our lost family, they should know the war, the family will continue. I said something like that to myself. It's been 80 years. I don't remember everything. But you can imagine I was like a newborn kid.
Thank you for sharing. Arn, you guys have the floor. You guys had a couple more questions.
Yeah,
And
we have like two more, if that's
sure.
possible. So the question is, what is your relationship with Germany now?
What is your relationship with Germany now? Would you care to share about the medal that you were just awarded in Germany, Ben?
Yes. It was a big honor receiving that medal in Germany from the German chancellor. And he gave it to me for the Zachor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation for teaching you kids that there was a Holocaust. Do not forget. I don't know what they teach you in school, but I'm sure they're not teaching you the details, whatever happened during the Holocaust. But it's important that you know, and the German chancellor felt the same way. He awarded me this award. And coming from Germany, it's a big honor, and I'm very happy to have received it.
If I could say something also real quick, Ben and I, my father and I, we have been to Germany many times, and we love the German people. You have a beautiful country. The generation is not the same as your grandparents, great grandparents, your ancestors. It is, yes, there are issues also with neo-Nazis, but your country is trying to make a difference and help educate the world about what happened. So, yes, Ben feels very fondly for the German people.
Thank you
Yeah.
guys for elaborating on that. And I know we had a couple questions about that, so you answered a few of those, Ben, already. Arn's class, you guys had a couple more questions, was it? Or are you guys good?
I didn't understand.
No, you're fine, Ben. We're just waiting on them.
We have more questions.
Sure.
Gail, could you?
I got you, Ben. They're asking the question now.
So then what was the hardest part of the time in the war?
What was the hardest part during the time during the war? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Ben, what was the hardest part, if you had to pick one part that was the most difficult to overcome during the war, what would it be?
I mean, the hardest part for me was receiving the 25 lashes, because it was a miracle that I survived it. That's when I realized God made me survive because he needed a witness. And this is one of the reasons why Zachor Foundation was born. That was my hardest part. There were a lot of bad things happening, and everything was bad. But when I walked up to that horseshoe, I thought I would never survive it, and I did survive it. Nobody believed that I survived it. So I am saying God made me survive in order to start the foundation that I did. Imagine walking 7 weeks in a death march, barefooted the last week in snow, and surviving this, surviving with one bread, with a hole in my throat, with all that filth, and I didn't get an infection. You could see that God was protecting me to survive the war. Now, he had a purpose, and I feel that Zachor Foundation is the purpose. So I could tell this story for you kids to hear it. It's a big, big honor, something that you should remember for the rest of your life.
Absolutely is. Arn's class will go with one more question from you guys, and we'll pop over to, we have a couple of questions in our neighboring countries, then we'll come back to you guys if you have more. So go ahead and ask another question.
Hello, Ben. My question is that how did you deal with the pain and the hate?
How did you deal with the pain and the hate after everything that you went through, Ben?
I don't know how I dealt with it. I've asked myself the same question. I have no idea. But I feel I am alive for a reason. The reason is the whole foundation.
Okay. Also, Ben, I'm sure he also lost faith in God for a while. And he ended, especially when he saw children being burned and putting into the ditches, he lost faith in God. And it was afterwards that he realized that maybe he was saved because he had a purpose. And then he began to regain his faith.
Yes.
One other thing is when you see photos of survivors smiling and happy that they're being, that liberation has come, those are usually political survivors, uh, people that they are not Jewish survivors. Jewish survivors are the ones that you saw that were very skinny and very weak. They had nothing. Yes, they were happy that they were being liberated, but they did not have homes to go back to. They did not have family to go back to love them like the other prisoners did. Their their liberation and their recovery process was very different.
Thank you for elaborating on that. We have a question from Charlotte in France. Charlotte, go ahead and unmute to ask your question.
Thank you so much. There's so much pain in your story, and I think that one of the main lessons I took away from it is that we are so much more than that. We are so much more than our pain and our suffering. So I was just wondering if you had any favorite memories of your family from before the war, moments that you'd like us to remember them by. Thank you so much.
Do I have any favorite memories?
Yeah, like any positive from your childhood that you could
Yes,
share.
a lot of favorite memories that happened to me as a child. Remember when the war broke out, I was 10 and a half. So my memories are very good memories. You see, we had almost two homes. My mother's side of the family lived in Munkacs, which was Hungary, and my father's side in Krakow, Poland. So every year, my mother would take us to Munkacs to her family, uncles, aunts, cousins, grandparents, and in the winter we'd come back to Krakow to go to school. So it's like having two homes. And I have very good memories from Munkac, especially. I loved that city and all the people in it. It's too long of a story to tell exactly what I remember, but I do remember things.
The Moonkoch property was a big property. It's now one of the main streets in Moonkoch, but there are all kinds of fruit and vegetable trees and orchards there. There was a lot of room to run and play and be with cousins, and that's I think some of my dad's favorite memories was spending the summers with his grandparents and the family in Moonkoch.
That's right. You're right.
Ben, I've been getting this question from a few different students from around the world, and they wanted to know what's one main lesson that the kids can take away from your story?
What they can take away from my story?
Yeah, one main lesson that you would say.
Important thing is memory. They should remember what I told them. They remember what happened to the Jewish people. And
Ben, I know you have a closing that you like to say to the students sometime. Why don't you? I typed it out for him so he could remember it. So why don't you read it. It's a very important message.
Okay. It's called Choices. While individuals can't always choose what happens to them, but whether it's a crisis or a calamity, people can choose to either let it ruin their lives or to learn from it and move forward. It's essential to understand the consequences of personal choices. It's possible to let tragedy or trauma become a reason to stop living. But it's also possible to live through extreme circumstances and commit to a life that has meaning, a life that matters.
Thank
One
you
of the
so much. Thank you
One
so
of
much.
the things that Ben reaches out and tells when he speaks to multi-generational speaking events where there are parents there along with the students, that you know, to honor each other, to be respectful for to one another. You know, the golden rule is do unto others as you would have ones do to you. Treat people with respect. Ben said before, we are all God's children. Whether you believe in God or not, we're all the same. We're made of, skin and bones and blood. We all love our family. We all want the best for our family. We all cry when we're sad or hurting, and we laugh when we're happy. There's no reason that we should hate each other, and there's no reason that we should hate other people for their differences or for the religion that they practice. We're different, and we should all learn from that, and we should respect each other for our differences and learn from our differences, not hate.
Thank you so much, Gail. And I know that it's getting kind of late for some of our kids in Eastern Europe. And we have the email. If you guys have any more questions for Ben, there's info@zahorfoundation.org, which is in the chat. We'll also have it posted on this video. This video is going to be shared out to everybody within a couple of days to everyone's email addresses. And Ben, do you have anything to add, or Gail, do you have anything to add before we end the meeting?
I would love for everybody to shout out. We're trying to get 6 million shout outs. You guys are in different parts of the world and Europe. And oh my gosh, and if we could get from Germany an outstanding number of shout outs, that would be incredible. We have the information on our website, ishoutout.org.
Yeah, and that link is in there in the chat, and we'll also have it available on the video. Ben, did you have something to add?
We're looking for 6 million shout outs to compensate for the 6 million who were slaughtered by the Nazis. So those shout outs will remain on our website for generations to come. So it's very important. Please do shout out.
And I know Ben usually ends with having people say two things. But before we do this, you're going to go home today. Tell your parents, your guardians, your siblings about the story you heard. Tell them. Tell your friends about it. Share it. It's important. This is why Ben is speaking to you. And he praises the words. Maybe we could all say it together. Never again. Never again. Never again.
So why don't we end today's meeting? We'll do that. I'll let everyone to unmute. Can we all try and say never again 3 times for Ben, and then I'll end the meeting for all. Is that okay?
Yeah.
We'd love to see your faces.
Everyone go ahead. You can unmute.
Never again.
Can we all together say never again? Never again.
Never again.
Never again.
Never again.
Guys, bye.
Never again.